Hi everyone, welcome to MartechBrain, a Netcore initiative where we speak to the best brains in MarTech and digital leaders and delve deep into one topic. My guest today is Lito Villaneuva, Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer, Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, RCBC, Philippines. He is also Chief Digital Transformation Advisor, Yachunko Group of Companies, and Chairman of Fintech Alliance, Philippines. Lito has been a thought leader on digital transformation and inclusive digital finance. He has over 20 years of experience in banking, telecom, payments, development finance, and financial technology. He has got over 50 global and regional awards, including being cited as one of the top 100 fintech leaders in Asia and the first and only Filipino. So welcome to MartechBrain, Lito.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And it's a pleasure to be with you.
And our chosen topic for our conversation today is trends in fintech, and we'll dig deeper into that. And as we go forward, let me start by asking you, Lito, tell us a little bit more about RCBC and your role, and of course, the digital transformation that the bank has gone through over the past year.
Okay. Well, I think to start, I think you have so many online viewers that are practically all over the world, right? So just to give you a snapshot of who RCBC is, or Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, it is a universal bank that has been in existence for about 60 years now, under the Yachunko Group of Companies, no? And it's one of the leading banks in the Philippines. And of course, one of the things that we've been trying to push is the massive digitalization efforts, even prior to COVID-19. And in fact, during the COVID-19 period, I mean, this pandemic, we have seen exponential growth when it comes to transaction volume and value, even reaching up to a 4-digit growth rate, no, for some of the digital channels during the hard lockdown. And we are also delighted that during that lockdown period, this pandemic, all our digital efforts that have been successful so far in terms of consumer adoption, given this 3 to even 4-digit growth rate, merited up to 5 global awards, no? And we've been cited or been named as the Philippines' best digital bank. And that's actually the first digital bank awards that RCBC ever got, no? And in a matter of less than a year, we were able to change the landscape for RCBC, and also become one of the leading digital bank players in the country. And in fact, we've been also tapped by government in disbursing emergency cash subsidy for affected families impacted by the pandemic, and we've done that through the use of our digital platforms, no? And in fact, it benefited around more than how many 3 million families, that would now cover about 12 million individuals, no? Sorry, 4.5 million families. So I think and so we have, in terms of strategy, we have two markets to be able to capture. One is the mass affluent and the mass market. So we have different products and services that would cater to those segments. And I think with this pandemic, it further accelerated the digital transformation of organizations across industries, across segments, across sectors, because it is a matter of how you thrive and survive during this crisis. And I think during that time, we are the only so we already have an existing mobile app or digital services or products that would be catering to the mass affluent, but it was only during the time of the pandemic that we were able to launch. It is actually the first and only mobile app that was launched at the height of the pandemic. This is called Discartech. So we were supposed to launch that on March 18, but unfortunately the government declared the hard lockdown on March 16. So therefore, all events have been canceled. All Filipinos, were actually asked to stay at home, and only the essential services have been allowed to operate. So drugstores, hospitals, and practically less than 50% of branch network of branches have been opened, right? So there's limited mobility. So it was only in July that we were able to launch what we call the country's first and only Taglish inclusion super app called Discartech. So in fact, after a month from the launch, we were able to record more than 1 million mobile app downloads. It's the quickest actually in the Philippines, because some of the players have actually reached their 1 million mark even after a year. And now 3 years from the time that we launched, 3 months from the time that we launched it, we are now more than 3 million mobile app downloads. So the first month that we launched it, we ranked number fourth, and the following month we ranked number one in terms of Google Play ranking. And that was really a delightful, a delight to all of us, because we've been, of course, the good thing here in your podcast, it's about MarTech, right? So marketing technology, etc. And at the end of the day, no matter how robust your system is, no matter how sexy your mobile app is, if it is not known to the public, if it is not embraced by the public, it's doomed to fail, right? So because at the end of the day, you don't want to be your product to be a best kept secret. You want everyone to know about it, right? So, but again, the challenge has been, how do you now make your product proposition or your product itself stand out from a very crowded space already? Because in the Philippines, we have almost 200 mobile apps. And on top of that, of course, we know that we have more than 4 million mobile apps worldwide. So, and practically everyone would be able to download and make use of any mobile app available worldwide, right? So that's the beauty of going digital, because it's borderless, right? So again, with that thing in mind, so you now have to come up with the best innovative ways of presenting your product to the public, right? So, and how can you now differentiate yourself and make yourself stand out from that, as I've said, from that crowded place, right? So, and good thing we were quite successful in making that differentiation, and at the same time how we were able to package it to the public, right? And in fact, on top of that being, having those exponential growth in terms of mobile app downloads, practically it's 1 million every month, right? So, but of course we know that it will taper off along the way, right? So, but the thing here is you're able to, the most difficult part is still on how you can now, sustain it, right? And also on top of that, so of course I'm a data-driven guy in terms of having to analyze all the behavior insofar as having to go through your data analytics, right? So it's everything has to be based on empirical evidence. So and we are very much into that, right? So for example, we have also tools such as social listening, being able to find out whether netizens are also getting along with our messaging, right? So in fact, 2 weeks after we've launched it, our social positive rating was actually at 94.5%. And very recently, about a week ago, our latest positive sentiment rating in social media is at 99.5%. So it's even further improving. So again, it's the messaging, it's the packaging, it's how you communicate it to the public, and how they will now be embracing it. Because again, the ultimate metric of success is, of course, consumer adoption, right? On how they will be able to use it, how they will be able to retain it, and how they will be able to also promote it amongst their families and friends. So I think that's the way to go.
And that's a fantastic overview. I think it's a remarkable success in a very short period of time. Lito, I wanted to back up a little bit, and I think you're a amazing speaker. You give a lot of talks. I want you to just educate our viewers, listeners on the whole area of digital and inclusive finance. So, what are your views on this, and why is this becoming so important going forward?
Okay. I think I've been in the inclusive digital finance space for quite a long time. And I think for you to be a successful, um, you know, practitioner in this particular space, you have to be an advocate, right? You have to believe in it, right? You have to have that passion that you are not just doing this for business, but you are also doing this for, for economic and social impact that would really redound to the benefit of the, of your target market, which would be the unbanked or underserved segment of the population. So in the case of the Philippines, we have practically 70% of the population to still be part of the what we call the unbanked or underserved. In fact, I've coined a different phrase for that. Um, this would be the financially disadvantaged segment of the society, because they don't have the means by which they will be part of the formal financial system. So that's why there are several, individuals that are very susceptible to being victimized by informal lenders, by, you know, uh, by loan sharks, and and so on and so forth, right? So because the concepts or the idea, or the things that we should be pushing forward would be more on financial education, digital literacy, and even consumer protection, right? So because they don't even understand the very concepts or terminologies about about interest, about compounding interest, about investments,
Mhm.
or even about savings, etc., etc. So for them, for as long as I get the cash, and that's it, without even, with no regard at all as to how much will I be paying it back, right?
Right.
So that's the whole problem, because again, the issue is that the formal sector, which would be the banks and other non-bank financial institutions, are not so keen to really lend them, because again, because of the absence of of a credit score. Hence, because of technology, because of digital platforms, we could now provide them with ways on how they can be part of the formal financial system, such as, for example, having to have a credit scoring algorithm as part of your alternative way of providing them a score, right? But of course, doing that is one thing, but having to educate them on the importance of credit score is another thing, right? So that's why I think, for my personal view, is that it starts, in all of this, because the financial inclusion piece is a very wide topic to begin with, and it's a massive subject area, that there are several pillars or pieces that you need to understand as well. And one of the most important pieces here would be really on education, right? Because again, how can your target market, or your audience, or the customers you are trying to cover, would be able to understand you, or the concepts, really, without you having to really educate them. And one way by which you can do that is, again, the language, right? So and of course, Philippines being an archipelagic country with more than 7,100 islands, with rugged terrains, coastal towns, etc. I mean, there are still also barriers, such as, again, the language. I mean, because you don't need to have it in English, pure English, because in the Philippines, Taglish is the everyday language, right? So that's why what we did was really to offer a mobile app that is in Taglish. So on top of that is that, how do you now, because the on the in the financial inclusion aspect as well, is that, of course, one of the barriers as well would be the lack of a on the national ID in the country. But what the good news is that the government has started with the first phase of uh, at least from 5 million to 20 million will be the target for the initial phase, to be able to provide them with a national ID. I mean, starting with the lower segment of the population, especially on how in disbursing social grants to to the poor and vulnerable communities. So, well, that's one thing, but it will also, of course, take some time because that's another barrier to entry because of the EKY, because of the KYC AML issue, right? So, but with again with technology, there is such a thing as eKYC, right? So there's a in liveness check. You can now capture an image of your ID, and they could now do facial recognition, AI, machine learning, etc. So all of these things that will come into play would really hasten the process and be able to at least improve and expedite the usual face-to-face slow process before, right? Because if you're talking of millions of individuals that you're about to capture, it will take some time, right? Because you've seen a number of banks, for example, in the Philippines, but and yet they have not covered the entire population because of that one barrier, right? Because banks in the Philippines have been in existence for over 100 years, and still we have that massive number of people that are not yet banked, right? So from the last estimates, we have about 55 million adult Filipinos that do not have savings accounts, right? So imagine that. So there's huge potential, there's huge opportunity for anyone in the market or for any one player to be able to capture that particular segment. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that it's more of, it's not really on I think it's more of pushing for an inclusive business or social ends, not beyond social enterprise. Because again, at the end of the day, we are not a charitable institution. We are not. This is not CSR, because practically this is a viable business that you could actually sustain moving forward. Because having to have a sustainable business that is inclusive will really spell the difference. And having having those target market that you have captured or trying to cover would now be the one to ensure that you have that your proposition is also being embraced and used by them to make it sustainable.
So in fact, if I summarize really in what you're saying is that there's a very large population of people, and not just in Philippines, but the same problem exists even in countries like India, where there's a large underserved population with no access. So access is the first problem, and you're using a combination of technology through the mobile phones plus education, which is very important to really reach out to these new customers and bring them into the banking system. Now, in this scenario, uh, how can technology really help? So it's not as simple as just having an app on a phone and giving it to them. I think you alluded to the fact that the question really becomes is how do you figure out if the loan is going to get repaid? How do you so that's where algorithms etc come in, I presume. So can you talk a little about the technology that plays a role in expanding banking or financial services access to the underserved?
Okay. Because in the before this technology, before this this fintech came into being, I mean, you've seen that most in case of Philippines, right? So you don't see bank branches in in remote areas, right? So because again, at the end of the day, it has to be a viable proposition for bank branches to keep their businesses there or their branches there, right? So and you don't see people to be going to those branches in on slippers or in sando, etc. And because they for them it is not really for them, right? So how do you now ensure that the farmers or the fisher folks or other ordinary people will now be able to have access to that? So that's why I think, to your point, technology and digital platforms would level the playing field, right? Because right now in the Philippines, we have the proliferation of mobile phones. I mean, there's the mobile phone penetration is so huge. I mean, so that to the point that practically the Philippines has been regarded before as a texting capital of the world, but now we're no longer doing texting, right? Because we're so much into social media, and now the Philippines is now regarded to be the number one in the world in terms of having the most number of Facebook posts, right? So because we are a social media addict in craze population, right? So you are so used to that. So it's a matter of how you now convert that,
Yeah.
that proliferation of interest using that device towards their financial welfare, right? And how you can make use of that device to be your tool for education, right? So that's why, how do you now make that practical, that small device to be your bank, right? So to be the one that will provide you with anything that you can actually request, that you actually want, right? So it may not only be just a communication tool, but it could also be a financial tool, or a livelihood tool, or a lifestyle tool, etc., etc. Because the mobile app in itself, so the mobile device in itself is a very powerful device that you can practically think of
Right.
anything that you could put there, right? Because again, that is really the affinity of an individual to a mobile phone is so great that I think practically uh, more than 80% of mobile users don't even turn off their phones while sleeping,
Yes.
right? Or while they are asleep, right? And I've chanced upon this article before, that if someone, for example, would be driving to their office, and in the middle of halfway through the office, or halfway through the house, I mean, before you notice that you forgot your wallet, the probability of you doing a U-turn just to get your wallet would be around 40%. But if it is your phone that you missed, the probability of you making a U-turn is around 90%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so because practically everything is in your mobile phone,
Mobile
right?
phone.
All your secrets, all your appointments, all your everything, right? So, and that's it, right? So because it's your mobile phone becomes your how would I say it?
Bank
your
branch and
yeah, your
ATM.
pseudo self, right?
Pseudo
So
self. Yes.
yeah, it's you, right?
Right.
So, and you're practically talking to yourself, right? So
And this transformation that you have talked about, that basically the serving the underserved, expansion of the market, uh, who will be best positioned to drive this? Will it be the existing financial institutions who've been there for many decades, or do you see them coexisting with new startups? Because we are seeing an explosion of startups, fintech startups, which don't have the legacy of the past, but which are very innovative in meeting customer needs. So, sort of, if you call them neobanks, or there are various terms, the new fintech companies, how do you see the future evolving between these two? Who will be best positioned to serve this 50 plus million new market that is getting created?
well, I'm a personal advocate of open banking. Of course, coming from the PSD2 of the EU, right? So, and in fact, the Philippine regulator has been very warm about, in terms of embracing it. And in fact, they just came up with a draft circular on what they call open finance framework. So, to your point, I mean, who will now be taking the lead, or who will now be more effective when it comes to servicing or being able to capture that 55 million unbanked adult Filipinos in the country. So I would say it could be both, right? So anyone actually, for as long as because again, with open banking, even the legacy banks is actually now partnering or even doing its neo bank proposition, right? So for example, for RCBC, I mean, when I came in, it's more of really having to have that fusion, having to have that hybrid, offer to the public. That's why we were able to maneuver it in such a way that we can quickly offer it to the public, to our consumers, right? So because the trust must also be there,
Yes.
because in any financial or banking service or product that you offer, the commodity that we are selling is trust, right? So, and of course, with the proliferation of fraudsters, I mean, cyber crimes, hacking, etc. I mean, that's why the investment needed really to ensure the protection of your consumers and the integrity and sanctity of your platform should always be at the paramount concern.
It's a great point, and I think if we look ahead, do you also see the rise of digital currencies, um, enabled by the fact that everything is on a mobile? Money is basically sort of fungible, digital. You don't need the cash. As we all know, China is doing an experiment with digital yuan. How do you see sort of the digital currencies evolving, and could that be a powerful mechanism for central banks to basically spread the access to the unbanked or the underserved people?
Well, I think if the question is more on will digital currencies be a reality, I think it will, right? But not now yet. It will take some time because again, currencies are supposed to be, the area or the domain of regulators, right? Because again, we have to have those regulators in place to ensure, the protection of the people as well, and to also ensure the monetary, financial, and economic stability of one jurisdiction, right? So that's why I think even the G7, I mean that uh, the those developed markets, those developed countries have been talking about it, and even for some of the what I call GEM, the growth and emerging markets, are also talking about it, right? But I think it will come into play um, in in a way, in I think it more of experimental, but not really on mainstream yet, right? Because I think it will take some time. That's my prognosis of the issue, because I think there will be a lot of testing, a lot of study to be made as well, because again, we've seen a number of what penalty hefty penalties being slapped on some financial players, even on issues of on data privacy or data breaches, etc., right? So I mean, these things, I mean, again, we just have to be extra careful about it, and that's why doing all these initiatives in our own little um, communities or jurisdictions or markets, etc., may also help to make sure that it is really something that is working.
Yeah, and from my last question before we get to our five ones towards the end is, uh, if if you had to give a talk to entrepreneurs looking at the fintech space going forward, what are the two or three suggestions that you will have for them to succeed in the fintech space? So fintech entrepreneurs, one, two, three, what would you recommend to them?
I think the first one is to go digital in terms of accepting payments, and with them, once they go digital and be able to accept digital payments for all of the purchases that their customers would be transacting with them, would also mean that will be number two, would also mean that they will now be able to create their credit profile along the way, because there is already electronic cash flow going on from
Absolutely.
between your customers and you, right? So that's number two. So number three, once you have that digital payments, and now number two, creating that credit profile, a credit score or credit profile along the way, then number three, you have now the capability or a chance by which you can now access cheaper or affordable uh, um, access to finance. I mean, meaning credit facility. And number four would be, if I may add
Yes.
to your three items, is also being able to be covered by insurance, because in any business, insurance is part of doing business, right? And yeah, and of course, number five, because in a micro entrepreneur, you have to complete the whole proposition. You have to have savings as well to put
Great.
your profit.
Absolutely. Great inputs. I think it's been a fascinating tour through the world of finance, and especially the new world of finance, where technology is, especially through mobile phones, is really transforming what we see going forward. And great advice, I think, for entrepreneurs. I think how to leverage the new world for themselves, and especially in in, again, countries like Philippines, India, and Southeast Asia, we see a lot of micro entrepreneurs, MSMEs, for whom I think the adoption of digital finance can really be a game changer in terms of how they can build a better business and more profitable business going forward. So thank you very much, Lito. And we'll come to the last part of the 5 ones. So quick, short answers. Of one future tech or trend that excites you.
There's just a lot. Hold on. I'm trying to check. I think it's hold on, because I have so many things in my mind. So that's just that. If you are to focus on just one, it would be, I think, more on the facial recognition.
Great point. So facial recognition, which can completely transform what we are going to see going forward. One trend tech that has disappointed you from its promise to what the reality has been.
Controversial question. I think on the blockchain for finance.
Got it.
Because we have seen a lot of stories about blockchain, but we have not seen really a boom, right? So
a boom, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. One good book recommendation for people.
Book recommendation. I've Cost Ovation. This is the book entitled Cost Ovation. It's a fusion of cost and innovation.
Wow, that's I had not heard about that before. I think that's a great title, Cost Innovation.
Cost Ovation. It's actually Cost Ovation. Yes. Cost Ovation.
Yes, Cost Ovation. Absolutely. One good person or podcast that you would recommend people follow, especially in the fintech domain or even otherwise, anything that you feel.
I've been following the IMF, the IMF head. And she's been very, I think, social media savvy. She has several posts, social media posts about her activities and the things that she's been doing. So I would go for the current IMF head.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's Geeta Gopinath.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's quite hard to pronounce her name.
Yes. Yeah, and she's of course of Indian origin, and she's very, very good. She's been speaking a lot, especially during the last few months, on what countries also need to do. And final question, one key driving belief in your life. You've been very successful. I think what's sort of been a driving belief?
Okay. I have this one thing that been since elementary, I think. I don't know if I could still recall it. If you want to be successful, it's just as simple. Know what you are doing, love what you are doing, and believe in what you are doing.
Great words, Lito. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful conversation with you. And friends, that was this edition of MartechBrain. We'll be back next week with yet another edition. Thank you.